we went to visit his extended family in the southeast or the east coast, and they're very like heavily surrounded by only other Caucasian individuals, and so they never are really exposed to the concept, and they don't understand, like, even just me being there as an Asian American, they seem confused about the different perspective that I have when they speak about um, I think like when they speak about politics, because even in my most recent visit to see like my cousins or my husband's cousins in Florida, they are very avid Trump supporters, and all they see it as a capitalistic gain. Like I work very hard like everyone else to gain money, and I agree with Michelle when she says that it is just an avenue to survive, and it's like it's not the most important thing, which I think a lot of conservatives are missing the point that it goes beyond that. And even just this afternoon, I had a discussion with a very heated discussion with my husband about how the curfew, I blatantly disagreed with it. If people are going to be demonstrating peaceful protests, then there's no reason for, even if they are past curfew, for the police to use non-excessive force, such as tasing or rubber bullets, you name it. And he said that, well, they're breaking the laws. Like, well, that's the problem, is that they the laws the issue. It's not. I understand in every situation, because I have many family members who are cops, and I like to think, based on their their experiences and what they share with me, that they are one of the good cops. But even then, I think the fundamental issue that a lot of people struggle with is where they feel like everyone is breaking the law right now, and especially on the conservative side. And my husband is not a conservative, but he grew up from a military background with lots of cops in his family, lots of military. Most of them are conservative, and he feels that is justified if they are breaking the law. Then cops can use non-excessive force, because that's what they're trained to do. And so I think it's more so an education aspect that's really lacking. And just in this week, his company had an uproar because his CEO had sent out an email that many felt were insensitive, because he quoted Martin Luther King, and he quoted Gandhi, and he's a very good intentioned, good hearted man. I've met him, but they still have no perception of, because all they're surrounded with are other Caucasians. So um, I think the whole situation is good, because it's forcing people to have conversations, and I think having that open communication is how change is going to continue to progress forward. But that's just been my experience in the past 2 weeks. I think it's been a very interesting one, because it's forcing people to talk about things that are generally very uncomfortable for them, because they feel socially pressured to talk about it, or they feel socially pressured to take like a position on it. Either way, I think it's good, because it's kind of bringing everything out of the woodwork. But
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for
Stephanie,
sharing.
thank you. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think it's sometimes I have like great ideas and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be great. Let me go do this. And then nobody else vibes with it. And I'm like, oh, okay, never mind. But yeah, I think it can be very interesting to see what happens in real time. And I talk to different people a lot about there is, in my mind, this idea of a good person. And a good person is not necessarily someone who like does charity all the time or is Martin Luther King all the time, in my mind. In my mind, a good person is someone who acts consistently no matter what the situation is. So even if the person is doing bad stuff, if they're consistently doing bad stuff, they're good, because they're predictable and you know how to deal with them because they're going to act the same way. But if somebody's acting chaotically, and if things don't go their way, they'll act this way, but if things are this way, they'll act that way. That's like, it's very hard to predict that and very hard to deal with that. And that is kind of away from how, in my mind, I describe a good person. But this kind of situation, I think, does bring to light the idea of consistency, in that when people are faced with adversity, I think it's not something that we like to do to people, or that we like to have done to ourselves, but it is kind of like a showing of what we do when things get tough, or how we act when things get tough. And I think a lot of times, things we didn't think we would do, or things we hadn't considered, we're forced to make decisions. And if we haven't already internalized that and be comfortable and made the kind of preparations to make those decisions, we kind of may do things we don't expect to do.
I don't know. I think a lot of times, for a lot of people, especially like in the circumstance that Stephanie described, a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. And so there's so many different times where people believe that their experience or their circumstance of life is kind of just general reality. And sometimes it can be hard for us to say, like, hey, even though I've had this experience for X amount of years, whether it's 10, 20, 30, whatever, that there may be somebody, not even say around the world, somebody down the street, my next door neighbor, who has a totally different, so almost on the other side of the spectrum of existing, their experience might be totally different. And so I think for a lot of people, it's hard to kind of envision that sometimes. And you just kind of, I'm not sure if it's laziness or just being comfortable, but you just kind of forget the fact that, hey, life for other people can be totally different than for me. And I kind of feel like that's what just happened. At least in, I know the current like news trendy stories, like the whole thing going on with Drew Brees, where he kind of stuck his foot in his mouth about his experiences. And I think that's a common example of where someone who had a particular opinion said something, and people didn't, I guess he didn't realize initially that, like, hey, that's not life for everyone, even though that's life for you.
I mean, I guess I could add to this. I kind of have a question, I guess, how to handle those situations where you are interacting with someone with vastly different opinions, because I made a post on Instagram today, and for the most part, there was a lot of kindness, but there was one person who responded in just blatant racism. And I was trying to respond respectfully, but it was tough. I think that they were deflecting a lot, or they weren't answering the points that I was raising. And yeah, I guess I would open that up to anyone who's had experience shifting someone's perspective.
I think as unfortunate as it is, like my husband's older brother is very he's an individual that claims not to be racist, but does and says very racist things without knowing it. He's only been in the surrounding, like he grew up in Georgia, and that he's a cop in Georgia. He is the definition of possibly what you imagine of someone abusing their power and enjoying it. And I don't have anything to say with him. And I used to get into a lot of arguments with because I've never met him in person, because I don't want to associate myself with someone like that. But I get into a lot of discussions with my husband. It's like, how do you talk to someone like that? Because he still calls him, and he's like, well, we just don't talk about it. And I told him, I think that's part of the problem. I think that they actively choose not to confront things that maybe their, quote unquote weakness, that there's a shortcoming in the way that they think, and they don't surround themselves with people who are willing to confront them, and they're not a community that's going to confront them. We're very, I think, like in Los Angeles, where I live, we're very fortunate that we have a melting pot community. Since the day we're born, a majority of us are conceptualized in, meeting different people from all types of backgrounds. And most of the time, like for myself, I met people from all types of economic backgrounds as well. So it really helped me in broadening my horizons. But I think it circles back to the question. I've found that there isn't much you can do to change someone's point of view if they're not open to listening to you. And if they're not open, and that's the first step, if they're not acknowledging that they have a shortcoming, or they have they have room to grow and learn and expand, then they're never going to get to that point, and you're talking to a wall. Because I've tried it, and especially for someone who's an adult, I feel that, and they've, you know, they're in their ways, there's not much I've been able to do. So if anyone has insight in a more successful attempt, then I'd be happy to, you know, learn from you.
I mean, sorry if I'm going to jump in real quick. I did want to quickly say that, you know, I do think that even though we're in a melting pot, there's still a lot of prejudice, and there's still a lot of, you know, these preconceived notions of who somebody is. You know, my close friends know this about me. And I think maybe it's helpful to mention it now in this bigger conversation. But my mom is Chinese Filipino, and my dad is half Black, half white. And I am profiled as an Asian person. And so whenever someone asks me, what are you? I've never shied away from telling them about my family. I love my family very much, so I get really excited about it. But then sometimes the response that I receive is, it's dehumanizing. I think I cannot count on my hands how many times people have just quickly said, you don't look Black, as soon as I've told them. And when I was younger, I didn't know how to respond to that. And as I'm getting older, I think I'm getting better and figuring out my voice and my words. But it was just really revealing that people do have a set idea of how they expect people to appear. And if you know, they're going to make judgments about you based off of your appearance. And if you don't fall within their judgments, you know, it's like they'll still need to rationalize it. Like, it's honestly like really kind of gross, the things that people have said to me after they said that you don't look Black. Like, or sometimes they would start to look me up and down and try to like pick out features to figure out like, how is she Black? And that is dehumanizing. And I'm not directing this anger at anyone. This isn't, I think this is my anger from the experiences, and I'm just sharing it real quick before I get too passionate. Yeah, and so I just want to say that real quick. But then I do hope we all circle back to ways that we can constructively talk to people and maybe break apart these ideas of race and racism. Yeah.
I think, and I agree with you, you probably expressed it better, but we live in a melting pot, but there are preconceived notions of who a person is supposed to be based on how they look, or their racial, what, anything physically attributed. But I think you shouldn't hold back on that passion, because that's when discussion happens. Like I feel like that's why I can get my parents to listen to things that I feel strongly about, especially like in the Asian American community. Like, we're guilty that we haven't been as active in the cause because we're comfortable. And my parents, they immigrated here from Vietnam, and they themselves told me like they don't truly understand exactly what's happening, but they're also open to learning because they know it's something that I care deeply about. And I think that's the important part. I think keeping that passion, like, you shouldn't apologize for it. I tell everyone, like, this is a very emotional thing, and as such it should be, and that drives positive change because people see that it's a very sincere and genuine feeling. It's not an exaggeration, whatever people may say about it. Like, I get very emotional about it, and it doesn't even like affect me on a personal level, but it affects my colleagues, my friends, people I care about, and so that becomes a very emotional thing for me. I've done a ton of research, and I've done a lot of more active, like proactive actions and speaking out and trying to educate people, even like um, my colleagues. And technically, it's not something you should talk about with your colleagues, but I think that's kind of the mold we need to break, that it's not something that we can't talk about with people, because it is a touchy subject. It is very emotional, and there's a lot of controversial views and conflicting points of views.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. No, I've never shied away from talking about it. If anyone ever asks me, I immediately, you know, I'm very proud, and I love my family. Like, my entire family has just been so loving to me, like my mom and my dad's side. It's more so, yeah, it is just hurtful, you know, when people want to deny a part of you. And I may circle back to this. I think I need to gather my thoughts a bit more. But yeah.
That's totally okay, Michelle. I think in my opinion, one of the most mature things a person can do is admit they are not adequately prepared for the moment and pause. So long as they're not like being attacked by a lion, you can't be like, "Yo, lion, I'm not prepared." Give me a second. But I think that's a sign of maturity and the ability to be open-minded and like, I'm gonna think about this. Hold on, let me not just shoot from the hip. So thank you for that, and thank you for sharing. I think to be honest, I don't know everybody in this Zoom meeting, and so I'd be surprised if somebody in this meeting did know everybody personally. But to get up and share like your personal experience with strangers, I think it can be very scary, and I think that it is very important in order for people to come together and to understand each other. And I think personally, like kind of with the title of this whole Zoom meeting, to kind of talk to what Stephanie was asking in terms of teaching other people and showing other people. I had hosted a community discussion on identity a while ago, back when we were allowed to sit on couches next to each other. And a gentleman had showed up, and he was from like the northern parts of America, like North Central America. I forgot what it was, but he was talking about how he had grown up in this kind of small town community, and everybody was kind of the same. They did the same stuff. Everybody knew everybody. And then he moved to Southern California. He went to school at Cal Poly Pomona. And he lived in California for a while. And like a year or two in, it dawned on him that he was a racist. And he didn't know this because he came from a place where race really wasn't a thing. Everybody was the same. And then he comes to a place where it's different. And not only are there other races, but people are acknowledging that, and there's different cultures, and people have different ideas and different religions. And he said, like, he's still dealing with it. It's been years, and he's still dealing with this idea that he's had to back out of and start looking at people like differently from what he's been taught and what he's been grown up with. And I think a lot of times the things that are not necessarily the best inside of people, the people that have those things inside of them, like racism, it may not be something that they put there or they know is there. And to teach people or to tell people that they're being something negative when they don't feel responsible for it, I feel can make them defensive or like not very receptive to that kind of feedback. And often I found that it may be difficult, especially when you're on the other side of it, like kind of to talk to Michelle's experience, like when people are calling you things, it may be very difficult, but sometimes to try and understand why they're saying that and get their perspective can be helpful in like creating this space where they feel safe to talk, because you're listening to them and they feel like it's not just you're bad, you're bad, you're bad. It's like, okay, well, I want to hear what you have to say. Why are you saying these things? And that can be very difficult if they're saying mean things to you. But that's kind of some place that I've had some success in.
I was hoping I could jump in, guys, really quick. My name's Elliot. I work for the California Naturalist Program.
Elliot?
And yeah, is it okay if I mention something? Am I interrupting?
No, we're having a
Thank you.
conversation.
Yeah, I wanted to throw in on what you guys have been talking about so far. First of all, thank you everyone for sharing your experience, and thank you, Jordan, for hosting all of this. My background is in environmental education, and I've kind of since branched out into climate change and mainly focusing on community and conversations and things like that. And we come up against a lot of climate deniers. And one of the things that's really good for training is when you start questioning people on their stance, you typically find that what you just said, Jordan, that either they either have a better explanation and you get their point of view, but more times than not, when they have a stance that's really not solid, it really starts to fall apart in front of their own eyes. And it's not you saying that it's wrong, it's them realizing it on their own level. So, and this can be transferred over to conversations about race, and these really difficult conversations to have about community. So when people have a certain point of view, or when they say something that's racist or subconsciously racist or blatantly racist, you know, saying, well, what did you mean by that? You know, who what do you mean by those people? What do you mean by that word thug? Like, what did you mean by that? And they start hearing themselves talk about the points of view that they have, you'll oftentimes find them that they fall apart. So I just kind of wanted to offer some practical tools. There's a whole, I don't have any resources right now, but there's a whole methodology of just asking questions and letting them answer it themselves. And like I said, you basically start to see them fall apart right in front of their eyes. So just wanted to offer that piece of information to you guys.
Nice.
Maybe it comes down to making sure you have good questions.
Oh, somebody's trying to join. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, that's for sure. One of the techniques, and we just had a meeting on this the other day, was one of the techniques that hard conservatives and the right really use, and you'll see politicians do it all the time, is they answer the question that they wished you had asked them. You know, so like, for instance, what's your policy on X, Y, and Z? They won't answer that question. They'll answer a question that makes them look good. So I'm not going to answer that question. I'm going to answer a question that makes me look better. So a lot of times you'll see people deflecting, you'll see people doing those things, and you just have to be ready with that armory of questions. You know, what did you mean by that statement? Are you aware that that statement that you said is hurtful to someone? How could that statement hurt someone? How could that hurt someone's feelings? You know, how would you feel if someone said that to you? So it's just kind of having that long list of follow-up questions. And yeah, it's tough. It takes a ton of energy. And there's something to be said about you not having to be someone's teacher and guide and educator through all of this. But if we are having these conversations, we take on that role. So.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I feel like in a lot of cases, well, it's easier to do it in person because you can kind of evaluate like what the situation, someone's sincerity, all that sort of stuff. But between in person and online, I feel like there's three main groups of people. There's just trolls, and that's kind of the tough one. You never really know. There are people who literally just kind of love to stir the pot just for the sake of it. So, and I can see people going. Sometimes I'll see conversations going on, and it may spiral down, and in some cases get off track. And I'll have to I guess try to message the person who is trying to seek reason and say like, hey, I think you're going down the rabbit hole and you're talking to a brick wall basically. And then it seems like a second group of people are the people who just don't want to be convinced. Whatever their opinion is, they're confident in it and they feel like that's it. You can't move me. I'm set in my ways. And it's like, okay, well, you can share whatever opinions or even something that's coming from a different perspective with them, but at some point we do have to accept that we can't change it. And then you obviously have a last group where there are people who have their opinions, but they're willing to evolve to change, to hear other opinions, and maybe, depending on what they hear, maybe they change, maybe they don't. I know when I talk to people, especially online, but also in person, it's never my personal goal to change your opinion. I kind of just want to know what you think. If it's worth it, I'll share what I think, and then my goal out of every conversation I have is to gain something new. Hopefully, I can learn something new. And like, that's great for me. If I can share something with you that you don't know already, awesome. But it's kind of like, I don't expect it all the time. And unfortunately, there are tons and tons of cases where nothing productive does come out of it, where there's kind of a clash and we have to kind of just say, hey, agree to disagree. And in most cases, especially if I'm like getting to a situation with someone where I don't want it to be an argument, like I'm always open to, hey, you have a different opinion, tell me why. I might have a different opinion, I'll tell you why. But if it gets to a point where, in many cases, this happens quickly, where there's the name calling, or there's the going off on a tangent, or just using examples that have no real base in reality. They're kind of just hyperbole and stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is kind of where I exit real quick. And unfortunately, it seems like that happens more and more. And it's an unfortunate thing for some people to come across. I have friends who are very got loud music around me. I have like various friends who are very passionate about very specific issues, and so it's kind of like their personal mission to try to help spread the word, spread awareness, get people like into that cause, especially if they don't already like know about it. And I always have to kind of let them know, like, hey, you can't save everything, in a sense, especially if it's like you're facing a lot of struggle or a lot of resistance. Maybe that's a sign that this isn't someone that you necessarily need to make that contact. Do you guys disagree, or does someone feel like maybe it is worthy to try to make that connection with everyone, or that everyone can be convinced of a more logical point of view?
I don't think everyone can be convinced, but I do think it just like kind of plants a seed, and you start thinking about it more, and hopefully like little by little they'll get it. So I work in higher education, and I used to oversee clubs and organizations at my alma mater. And we once had a student walk in asking to start a white cultural center. We have ones for African American, API, Latino, so on and so forth. But and he walked in very confrontational and expecting a no. And so I was like, well, let's sit, let's talk, let's discuss as to why you think this is needed. And let's talk about the intentions of all these other things. Knowing that he came in with a no and with expecting a no, I love the idea that Ellie brought up of ask questions, right? We have to ask questions. We have to know what kind of questions to ask, but also be mindful of tone, because oftentimes people find questions challenging. And it's like, I'm not here to challenge your opinion. I'm here to genuinely learn, like you said, Rocky, like, why are you thinking this way? Why do you want to put this forward? Because if I understand where they're coming from, we can start breaking that down. And so there's a lot of conversational tools where we like, I'm and setting it forward. I know sometimes it seems like obvious, like saying like, I want to understand you. I want to have a mutually respectful conversation. If at any point it gets too much, we can both tap out, or it's like let's take a pause from one another. If at points you feel like you need to take a break, or if you want to reword something, then that's great. I'm going to try to repeat everything that you say in the way that I thought you meant, so that way there doesn't leave room for like misinterpretation, especially with those challenging conversations with folks who think you're going to combat them, or if they're coming at you. Because I think it also disarms people who are coming at you aggressively. They're like, whoa, I was ready for a fight. And I'm like, no, I'm gonna try to be your friend. And if we're not gonna be friends, like that's fine. It's not gonna ruin my day, because like I lived my life without you in the first place. So I think those are some of the ways that we can approach the conversations. And then also self-preservation for ourselves, because there are some moments when I'll engage in conversation where I'm like, there is no point in talking to you further, or maybe I'm at a point of exhaustion where I'm like, let me pick up this with you later. I don't want to quit on it, but I've reached my limit, and I think nothing productive is going to come from this after that, like anymore. While at work, I can't always do that, but with my friends, with strangers that I've encountered, I do have that ability to do so. So open communication, y'all. I think that might help us out. And you know, do you first. Right.
I'm really encouraged by just the general conversation tonight, talking about questioning and exchanging ideas. I'm a bit older, and one grew up in a family where you didn't discuss much, particularly if you didn't agree. So it was kind of the weather and some other generalities, but there wasn't any, tell me how you think about this. And I have a feeling that it's your generation that's going to make the difference today, is that your conversations with each other will extend to those of us who are older, where I think some of the more serious problems lie. That we've carried, some of us knew it and some of us didn't, the burden of not understanding and accepting others. I grew up in a very small town where there were only white people. And so it was in my teens when I got into scouting and met girls of other races, and a little in college, and then more as I got older. And I think one of you mentioned someone didn't know they were racist until they moved somewhere else where there were differences. And I think that may be true of a lot of people my age and maybe 20 years younger. And I think we have a lot to learn. And the conversations this week about the conversations with the young men in the families about what you have to be protected about and how you have to act. I don't think a lot of us know about that or knew about that unless we had friends of other races. So I think those discussions this week have been very eye-opening for many people. And I think those are the things that are going to also add to making the difference in the future, that we will listen to each other, but we will also be brave enough to ask questions. So I'm really glad to be a part of this group tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Shelley. And I want to stress how much I think, this is my personal thought, that protesting is good. Donating to organizations is good. Signing petitions is good. But just because the thing you contribute is not on a billboard somewhere, or it's not very flashy, or you can't make a post about it, doesn't mean it doesn't make a difference. And to Sherry's point, I really do think having the patience and having the open-mindedness and open-heartedness to talk to other people, understand them, seek to understand yourself, and maybe change yourself even. Maybe you're asking the questions because you think this person is acting in a way that's not good, and it exposes something from yourself that you maybe need to work on too. Like that kind of thing, it's small, but if we all do it all the time, it's really big. And I think that really does make a difference in how people act, how they want to act, how they think. And it's less about, well, this was how I raised, I don't know any other way. It's less about, you're making me feel uncomfortable because you're trying to get me to change. Why do I have to change? Why don't you change? It's less about that. And it's like, hey, let's work together. Hey, let's talk. Hey, what do you think? Why are you making that face? I thought that was an okay thing to say. So thank you guys for kind of coming and bringing these ideas and these thoughts out. This is really good.
One question I would have is if anyone thinks there are any other, I guess, outside of the typical kind of social media interaction, any other ways that they can make a difference or communicate better?
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Rocky. I think Elliot, he was saying a good thing with ask questions and seek to understand. Rocky was saying a good thing with come into the conversation with a good motivation. I shouldn't come into the conversation saying, the reason I'm here is to tell you I'm right. Like, it shouldn't be something like that. I feel like it should be something like, the reason I'm here is to hopefully learn something. The reason I'm here is to talk to you. I think that the conversation should have and maintain a reasonable motive. You should ask questions and seek to understand. And one of the things that I found in terms of my communication style that really helps people is trying not to ask questions or talk in a way that forces somebody into a certain position. And if they come to that themselves, that's okay. And if they come to that themselves and they don't want to admit it out loud, that's okay too. But I shouldn't talk in a way where the only way to get out of this is to be like, okay, I'm a racist, I'm sorry. I shouldn't be like pushing somebody to admit something or to label themselves, and I shouldn't label them myself. Just asking questions, just trying to understand. And I'm not saying like let them off the hook or give them an out or something, but it's not my job to go around with my label printer and call you this and call you that and call you this. Like if I'm trying to do something constructive, I think labeling can come in a lot of forms. It could be you're an extremist, you're a protester, you're not listening to me, you are this. I think getting away from the you are this and more into the, well, why did you say that? Like talking about actions rather than the person, I think is very helpful.
Also too, Jordan, I want to just piggyback on something you said repeatedly in your response just now. You mentioned the word okay several times. And just from experience and my journey, more specifically to you, Michelle, when you're in those situations, you know, that you anticipate there's going to be some uncomfortable questioning, I think if you learn how to arm yourself to be okay, I think okay is very critical in terms of being okay with the outcome, because there's no reflection to you or of you. I think if I recall correctly, were you the one we talked with at the meeting at the bookstore?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought it sounded familiar. And I think I shared with you, I kind of relate to your journey. And I'm the one that's the mutt. Okay, when people ask me, what am I? I'm a mutt. And that, you know, I use that really strategically, because when I come back with that response, people don't know how to handle it. You know, they're like, what? You know, because they're looking for something else. But that conveys to them that the whole, as you put it, Jordan, the goal to label me, I'm not interested in that. Like I said at the meeting, I want to know who you are as a human being. I'm not really interested in what ethnic group. That doesn't mean that it's not important, but I want to get to know your heart first. The other stuff is secondary. So, you know, if you kind of practice that art of whatever the outcome is, I'm okay. Okay. You follow me? I think that will take you a long way.
No, I mean, I really appreciate you saying that. And it's funny because for most of my life, I think I was okay, but I was okay in a sense I didn't understand that as an adult, all of these things that people said to me would resurface and affect me as much as they do. And so the last year has been a bit more painful because now, you know, now I'm starting to analyze, like, what did they mean when they were saying that to me? And what did they mean when they, like, you know, looked me up and down and tried to categorize me based on my features? And why didn't they just want to know who I was? And I think you are right. I think you're completely right that I'm going to be able to talk to a lot more people and perhaps like reshape the way they understand race if I'm just, you know, I'm solid in who I am, and I just, you know, I emphasize that, you know, first and foremost, you know, I am me, and then maybe we can talk about my culture and my family later.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I always thought, like, when I was little, I think the idea of colorblind can go a lot of different ways. And depending on how you use it and who's using it, it can tend to be something that people get offended by when they say I'm colorblind or something like that. And again, with, I think labeling is a form of judgment. If somebody ascribes to something or says that they are this, I almost always think they say that because they think it's a good thing. And if I'm saying I'm an engineer, and then you're like, well, engineers are terrible, how dare you be an engineer? Then I'm going to automatically get defensive. And I remember like me thinking as a kid that race didn't matter, and that like the term colorblind to me meant that. And as a kid, I was like, I am that, and I'm way more concerned as if you're a mean person or if you're cool to hang out with. I didn't care if you were female. Some of my friends when I was 7 were 25. Or I hung out with old people. I like go to old people's houses, talk to them because they were interesting. And it was not about anything but the things you had control over, how you acted, the words you used, were you mean? Did I learn stuff from you? Could I play games with you? And that was what I focused on. But then I learned as I got older that calling that colorblind, which to me was like very accurate in a technical sense, was something that I received some like negative feedback from, which always confused me because that term can mean something good, and I think it can mean something ignorant, but to just automatically assume someone means something and then judge them based on what you think they're saying rather than kind of what Justine was saying, like, why did you say that? Seeking to understand and like trying to create a conversation. I think what you're doing is actively killing the conversation. Has anybody tried to, I guess, engage in critical conversation, maybe with somebody that's not as in the same place you are over kind of the recent events, even if the conversation happened a while ago, like before what happened in the last 6 months, like along those kind of lines of those kind of topics?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a situation like that about 3 days ago with someone who was making, it was kind of odd because it was a situation where what was going on in the world hadn't been brought up, but this person mentioned it, and it seemed like a way to kind of to want to criticize the situation, as in like kind of when someone out of the blue says, like, I don't know why people are rioting or why people are destroying property. And it's kind of like, well, I mean, you're saying that as a statement as opposed to like actually asking. And so, but luckily, I mean, I am friends with this person, so I kind of asked them, well, what is it that you don't get? And they went into the situation of saying, like, well, why would you say, or wouldn't you get more people on board with your cause instead of saying, like, Black Lives Matter? Instead of saying that, wouldn't it be more effective to get a bigger coalition to say all lives matter? And like the situation I explained to him with that was, I was saying that, for example, the easiest way to describe that is that if you're the house on fire situation, I'm sure most of you guys have probably heard that example. And another way I explained that to him, and he seemed to get it, but was kind of still on the fence. And after that, I asked him, I said, well, like, do you support Blue Lives Matter? And he was like, yeah, of course. And I was like, why? He was like, well, because like I feel like there are certain situations where people don't like appreciate the value and the danger that people who wear the uniform are in. And it's like, so when you say that, are you inherently saying that anyone who's not a cop doesn't matter? And he's like, no, that's not the point. And it's like, then inherently you already understand what Black Lives Matters just because you already support it, but just about a different group of people. And then after that, he was just kind of like, all right, cool, got it. Didn't bring up anything else after that. So
That is awesome.
I think
a lot of people forget that when you are committed, and this is kind of any cause, whether you are someone who advocates for climate change, someone who advocates for a particular demographic of people, that just because you are supporting that group doesn't mean that you are excluding other people. Like I think, and inherently, I think that part of that is just kind of, part of that is having been raised in a capitalistic society, so that's kind of just the way we're used to things. We don't think of, like, when you think of money being, you don't think of money being made or being created. It's kind of just transferred. It's going from one place to another place. And so you typically think of if someone, that attitude, although that works in most of our economic current situation, that doesn't really work socially. It's not that just because I am gaining more enlightenment or I want to be appreciated, that doesn't mean that by me being appreciated, you are inherently not appreciated. But it seems like as a society, we kind of think of it that way. And mainly that might be because we have been treating people like that, where you are putting one group of people on top of another. And so we kind of inherently kind of assume that it has to stay that way.
Okay. It's so funny to me sometimes how I feel when I have a good conversation, especially about talking. Like I feel like right now we're having a conversation about conversation with people that are open to conversation. It seems so simple. Like, yeah, just do this. Just, understand people and be open-minded and be a nice, good person, and it's all good. But then you like step into the reality of the opposite of what's happening right now. Not to call this like the best perfect case. We're all like the awesome people and everyone else is terrible. I'm not trying to say that. But like when you have a difficult conversation, it's very interesting how even though we can sit here and talk together and learn methods, it's still difficult to have that conversation, even though you have good intentions, even though you've practiced skills, even though you kind of have come into it with good intentions. And there was something I read in a book called Crucial Conversations, which is it's an amazing book, I think, because it talks about how to have what the book calls a crucial conversation, and that is something where there's high risk, like there's stakes, like maybe your marriage is on the line or something like that. There's emotions involved, and people have differing opinions. And when those things come together in the moment, how can you not get mad and say things you don't mean? How can you maintain your desire to have a good outcome and things like that? And it one of the things that it said, which like it's the kind of thing where I'm like reading a book, like okay, and then I have to like put the book down and go take a lap and like think about it. It said that your emotions change your motives. And so if I'm like, I'm going to talk to Justine and I want to tell her about my day, and then we get into some disagreement and then I get mad at her for some reason, my motive could change from, oh, I want to talk to her and have a good conversation, to I need to be right, or she needs to know that that's not okay. And now the whole motive for what I wanted has changed, and everything I say starts changing. The way I understand information starts changing, and it can start spiraling out of control when you look at it from the perspective of the original intent. And so, hello, Lisa, welcome. I wanted to bring that up in that I think sometimes it can be nice and it can be empowering to talk in positive circles about things. But when you get into a tough situation, the environment changes. And I think it's important to be aware that if you change what you want in a conversation, it can change a lot of how you perceive everything in that conversation, which is one of the reasons I think it's so difficult to teach others when you think they're wrong, because they're not in teaching mode, they're in defending mode. Because I think it's like you're wrong and I need to tell you something, and then they're like, I'm not wrong, what are you talking? And then like they're still battling with that, and now they're defensive rather than being with the original intent of what you're trying to do.
Which is also why a lot of marriages fail.
I have no experience in that, so I don't know what to. I'm gonna trust you.
So Jordan, it's good that you brought up emotion though, because I feel like specifically right now, there's a lot of kind of tense situations going on, and there is a lot of emotion. This is a different situation than, say, had we, most of the people currently having conversations, if we'd had this conversation in November. In most people's eyes, they would see it as kind of a very different sort of experience. They may be in a different state of mind. And so it's tricky. I don't think there probably is a definitive answer on how do you have an important conversation that can't wait while staying measured against someone who you disagree with. Like it's kind of like a lot of stuff that people have to juggle there to try to stay level-headed. I guess maybe one thing that kind of helps me sometimes is visually seeing it. Like almost in some cases, I do have to try to separate myself directly from the emotion and try to treat it in a as logical of a situation as possible and say like, hey, and it's not necessarily breaking it down into like an equation, but it's more about being able to actually see what my point is and what the other person's point is and kind of follow wherever they go. And usually if you're dealing with a reasonable person, they can either see something new, see that they're right, they're wrong. Hopefully you're reasonable. I mean, so there's no guarantee that you going into the conversation are right. There are a lot of people I meet who are coming from that perspective, that just because you have good intentions does not necessarily mean that your perspective is correct. And it's sometimes it can be hard to step back, especially when you are coming from a place of well intentions to say, hey, am I looking at this right? Or is there maybe a different way I could come about it? Unfortunately, with a lot of these situations, it's not really like this or that. It's somewhere in the gray area that typically winds up being the most accurate. And for a lot of us, it's hard to kind of figure out how do we, where do we get to that middle ground? Most of the time for me in I guess in relationships, whether it's kind of business, friendships, or in romantic, there's some sort of compromise. There's something where it's like, I have to give a little, you have to give a little, and we have to find some sort of balance, and that's the only way you can survive. I feel like these conversations that we have with people, especially about issues that we care about, are forming relationships of a sort, even though it may just be with someone that you're just having that conversation with. If we treat them, one thing that a lot of people don't do in these situations is treat the people they're talking to like their relatives. In a sense that this is somebody that you know that you still, outside of this conversation, you still care about. Because at least with that, I've come to find for me personally with that situation, even when we are very angry with each other, we at least have that baseline that is like, hey, at the end of the day, this is still somebody whose well-being I care about and who I know they care about my well-being. So we can kind of use that as kind of the base to work from.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I think finding that way to step away and remember why you're there is important. I think if it's an interesting exercise, sometimes you got to talk to somebody about something and it may be a touchy subject. If you write down what you want going into the conversation before and put it in your pocket, and then immediately following the conversation, pull that piece of paper out and look at it and compare that to what actually happened, I think sometimes you find that you changed what you wanted in the conversation because you did not step away from your emotion. One of the things I used to do, which is kind of like on a lighter note, when I was little and I would like a girl and I wanted to talk to her, I could never remember the name of the girl that I liked. So I would just write it on my hand. And that was kind of like the tell that I liked her, because I'd be like, hello, blah, 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 like talk. And every time I needed to know her name, I'd be like, and I'm saying that because if you wrote down, or if you had a real reminder of why you're here, why am I talking to this person, what are my goals, and you looked at it periodically throughout the conversation, would that change the way that you navigated the conversation? Because when people are yelling at you, when people are being mean to you, when they're slandering you and saying stuff that's not true, sometimes you start changing the way you act, not away from what you originally wanted, because these people are being persuasive in the way that they're acting to get you riled up and to get you to change. Because I think this is really interesting. If they can get you off base, they don't have to deal with what you were initially coming at them with, which is kind of crazy. Like, to think about it that way, it's a pretty effective. If I can get you mad enough that you forget what you were talking about, I don't have to go through that self-realization. I don't have to answer those questions or even be asked those questions, because we're going to have an argument now. and I get off scot-free. And I don't think a lot of people realize that may be what they're doing, but that's super easy. Like if Michelle is trying to tell me that I'm being super sexist or something like that, and then I gaslight her with something about you're just saying that because blah, 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 and then she starts yelling at me for some other reason, then I don't have to deal with the potential of me being sexist at all. And that's great for me because then I don't have to grow. But I mean, it's not great, but in the moment it feels like I won, and then I'm like, okay. But I think that the conversation, it's important to really, if somebody says something to you and in your mind you're like, that was kind of racist, or I felt offended by that, it's like that made me feel dehumanized and stuff. If you're going to respond to that and try to get the person to understand, before you respond, I think taking a second to say, okay, if I want this person to understand they hurt me with their words, what can I say that will actually get them to understand? Not what can I say that will make me feel good or make me feel self-righteous, because that's not what I want. I want them to understand that they hurt me. What can I say? How can I word this in a way that will get them to understand? And a lot of times it's a wording that you don't like because it forces you to put your emotions away, and you're emotional right now. So yeah, props to kind of bringing that up and talking through that, Rocky. Thank you. I did want to say a little bit before we got too much into conversation dynamics and theory. I think it's really good that we talk to each other. I think it's really good we try to understand each other and then come up with ideas and methods for kind of spreading the fire of conversation, and like good conversation, not just accusing and polarizing conversation. But that's not all we can do. I've found this is something I find that I have a skill in, to try and bring people together and try to have people talk and not yell at each other and stuff. But everybody has their own skills, and I feel like everybody can use their regular skills to help out with the community. And just because you don't have one of the like very popular social justice skills like event organizing or public speaking, like you don't have to have something very specific to social justice to use your skills to help towards social justice. And you don't have to put away your regular skills so that you can go do social justice. I feel like when we all use what we're good at and we come together as a community, it's very surprising how easily we can get stuff done, as long as we have that communication and we're really like intact with what we can do to help. So I wanted to like kind of open the floor to say, like, does anybody have skills that they think are important, or creative ways to use certain skills, or maybe they have services that they wanted to put out there in case somebody else could connect them with somebody, something like that? I hope that's a question. I think that's a question.
Well, yeah, and I also wanted to add to that, you know, like if you also know anybody who has skills like in law, or, you know, just anything that you think might help, also maybe present them or mention them, because it would be really great if we could even just compile maybe like, I don't know, a directory or something. Yeah. I mean, I myself, I'm a fashion designer, but I can also draw. I can take photos. I wouldn't call myself a photographer by trade, and I can use Photoshop and Illustrator. And so those are some things that I feel pretty confident that I can contribute. I don't know exactly how design would fall into all that, fashion design. That's, I think, a question I have to wrestle with. Yeah.
Okay. I think as an example, I kind of like did a call to action and didn't give examples, so I'm going to say out loud that if you don't know me, Herd this is the first episode of Herd, and it's looking like I want to do more because this was really nice. But I put on philosophy and critical thinking events because I think it's important to get people to talk and to understand and to really use their mind so that we can, on a regular basis, be of strong mind so we can think critically. So when there are important times, we're not weak of mind. It's like you run and you do push-ups and stuff, so that when something happens, you're strong enough to act. And so I do, like, actually now I do 6 times a month. I do events to try and encourage people to have free thought and think on various subjects and stuff. And so what I thought immediately within my skill house is to put on a conversation, but more directed towards the social justice thing, which is, I guess, not a protest with signs and stuff, but I think this is helpful. And so that's kind of an example of what I mean, of using the skills you already have, the things you already do, the things you love. I know I see Kristen's face on a picture. I know she's a musician, and music is really great. And it doesn't always, like, as music as an example, it doesn't always have to be like writing songs or something that's like all the lyrics are social justice lyrics or something like that. It could just be playing some music for some people, or like maybe if there was a community hit really hard by a death or a riot or something like that, maybe like sending good vibes and helping people to get on and helping people with their self-care and stuff like that. I think self-care is a very important part of social justice. We need to take care of each other so we can act. And some of the skills that we have in our social justice is just caring for ourselves and caring for other people. And I think music is a very good part of just care and understanding and connecting. And that can be like a major act of social justice, to just be there for other people or provide a space that's comfortable for them, and music can help with that a lot. So just some examples. Sorry to put you on blast, Chris, but I like your music.
Well, I can share that I come from a background of having more experience with like video editing, things of that nature, just because I work on segments connected to kids and youth sports. And so whether it's the interviewing of certain athletes, then going out and getting their footage about kind of everything that gets them to being excellent on the field and off the field, all the elements from a production sense that go into that is stuff that I experiment with and have kind of built a lot of years of experience with, whether it's like your editing, Photoshop, like what Michelle mentioned, After Effects in some cases, or if it's like audio engineering with Logic, or having to do an audition. A lot of that sort of stuff is kind of what I do on a daily basis. So if anyone needs a video done, let me know.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's super. It's very difficult to edit videos. So, I mean, that's a great skill. I do want to ask if anyone knows someone who has experience in policy. And I think I briefly mentioned law. I do think that that could be really useful to getting someone's insight and maybe having them connect with someone who can create videos or graphics and, you know, compiling information in a really approachable way. And, you know, trying to figure out how we can combine all those skills and link them up together. Because it is difficult if you take it all upon yourself. Like if Rocky, you were going to make an informational video and you were like, well, I'm also going to do all the research and I'm also going to like verify the sources and I mean, you can do that, but oh my God, like that could take like a week. It could take weeks. You never know. And so it could be really nice to, you know, get people who have experience right off the bat. And if you know somebody, or, you know, just keep that in mind if you hear of somebody. It'd be great to pass them along.
Yeah. And also sometimes I get really passionate about stuff and I just start talking. One of my my great skills and flaws is the fact that I just say what I think and I don't always think about what I say. It's okay not to be on the front lines, be the person on stage, and be the one that is pushing your passion. And if you're not, like if you own a restaurant and if you didn't convert your whole restaurant into some social justice restaurant or something like that, that's okay. That's fine. I think still being open-minded, listening, reading and educating yourself on all the sides, not just one media outlet, going to different places and trying to understand both sides or more than two sides. I think there's always more than two sides. And then being willing to be patient with other people and talk to them and understand them. I think that is something everybody can do. Even children can do that. I think children are really good at that, actually. And it's very important. And I kind of brought up the skill thing, just like if anybody is passionate about something and they were looking for a place to do that, I wanted to bring that up. But I feel like nobody should feel pressured to do that in their own lives. I know. Somebody talking? Oh, I thought somebody was talking. Like I know I was talking with Michelle a little bit earlier when we were thinking about putting this Zoom on, and when stuff like this happens, me personally, I have this feeling in me when I'm doing stuff that whatever I'm doing is not enough and it needs to be more. And I have to fight with that sometimes. And I know I could do more, but the way that I think about it as I get older is, could I do more and sustain that indefinitely? And if the answer is no, then I should not do more. I only want to do stuff that I can do consistently. I don't want to be a social activist when someone gets murdered. I want to be a social activist at the same level 100% of the time, in the same way that's consistent. That's me. And so I'm kind of like sharing that it's there. I feel like a lot of times we do have this desire, this yearning to do more or to be more or to go above and beyond and give my whole paycheck to somebody or something like that. But then, like, now you can't pay rent, so don't do that. Try, and again, with being emotional and being logical, like with the things you do, think and make sure that what you're doing is good for you, that it doesn't put you in a bad place. Self-care and education is a form of resistance. It is a form of social justice. Education is like the best form of social justice there is ever. Like, if you want to do something, educate. But if you have other talents, go ahead, share them, use them, that kind of stuff.
Can I jump in really quick again, Jordan? Sorry. Yeah, 100% on everything you just said. And everyone is doing what they can do in their own capacity. Like you said, we can all do more. But is it going to be long-term healthy for us? And is the work going to be sustainable? Because if it's not, it might, it might be better left to someone else doing it that's better equipped. I wanted to go back really quick to the conversation about policy. And how we don't necessarily need a gatekeeper to affect policy.
Okay.
Right now, all you have to really do, and this is varying levels of accessibility, but a lot of times you can get on the phone with your council member, city council member, your district, within your district area, your district, I forgot to call it, supervisors, or I just forgot the name of what their title is. But anyway, they have to have an office in your area typically it's within a couple miles of someone's residence. So there's ways to look at policy and get in on policy that aren't necessarily a gatekeeper method. There's ways you can have your voice heard. And even if that's like, a lot of neighborhoods have like a really neighborhood section. So I live in Long Beach, and there's about 30 or 40 small little neighborhood boroughs, and they all have their own name, and they all have their specific. There's
Elliot, I think you're cutting out a little bit.
Micro hyper specific to bi-weekly basis. So influence.
Elliot, are you there? I think, at least on my end, that was a little choppy in terms of the internet connection. And so I don't know if that's what everyone else experienced, but I think we might benefit from kind of a recap of that if you're still there.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't coming through. Basically, getting involved on the local level, the hyper local level for government. It doesn't necessarily have to be going to your senator or your governor or your mayor. It could be city council. It could be smaller district areas, things like that. There's ways to get involved on that level as far as we want to affect policy goes. That's the main point.
Yeah, and it's so amazing how I think us as humans, we tend to think very grandiose, like I need to build my own rocket to get to Mars, and you don't. Like, I need to build my own telephone to call Michelle. It's like, I don't. I can just buy one and call her. And you can call your officials. You can host meetings. You can fight ignorance, and you can show people graciously the fallacies in their logic, but then also be open to, like, maybe you're being fallacious as well. It's very, like, just pick up the phone. It's very easy. And it can almost seem unrealistically easy. But we have a voice, we have power, and a call, like when you think about, there's this idea that one voice doesn't matter or one vote doesn't matter. But when 1 million people have that thought, it does matter. And so by you being a voter and by you putting that I voted sticker on, like, maybe it's not even the fact that you voted. Maybe it's the fact that you put that I voted sticker on, and 20 people saw that and they were like, oh, today's voting day. And then 20 more people went to vote. And now 20 more people have voting stickers. There's a lot of little things that maybe we don't always focus on so much that can have a big impact. And I would say, before we try and go out into the world and build our rocket ships to get to Mars to, like, change the world, the biggest change that we can make is, like, if I'm asking people to protest, if I'm asking people to call their senator, or, hey, here's some links to do this, I don't feel I should post links on how to support until I've went to those links and I've supported. And I don't mean like if I post 20 donation links, I don't need to donate to all of them. That's, again, with going above and beyond way too much. But, like, look at them and maybe donate to one and then encourage people to donate. Or if you're like, oh, here's some movies that you can watch that'll help you understand, like, well, maybe you should watch those movies too. Or maybe have a movie party. I know people like to have parties. So, like, some kind of ideas for things that may not seem big, but I can almost guarantee you there's everybody in this room has had a moment where somebody has come up to them and be like, man, I was going through something, or this was really hard for me. I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you gave me that ride home. I was in such a bad place. And at the time you were like, yeah, you want a bowl of cereal? Okay, yeah, here, whatever. But that bowl of cereal was a big thing because their parents are abusive and they were getting hit at home, and you invited them into your home and it was a safe space for them. And now they feel like they have there's, like, all little things can often have a very big effect. And I would say, don't take that for granted. Don't take yourself for granted. Don't take your power for granted. We can all make a difference. And I don't think we should waste any time trying to measure that difference. I think we should spend our time trying to make that difference. That was really good.
That was great. That was good.
I feel like you've changed my, like, outlook on cereal now. I'm gonna just look at it totally differently now.
Yeah, cereal is actually it's the official food of my family. So yeah, it's pretty important to me.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think this has been really spot on for me. I've really enjoyed listening to all you share, and I've got a lot of great notes. And Jordan, I appreciate your encouragement to not hold back. Also, like, what you have to offer. So two things I've kind of just been doing the listening role, but wanted to share two things that kind of came up. One, in some of my conversations with people that have been difficult, especially I have a lot, being white, I talk to a lot of other white folks, like my family members, and also the emotional piece sometimes is very difficult. Like, how invested you are in the outcome can really get you worked up yourself. Like, you have to believe what I believe because I love you, but then they don't believe it, and then you're so frustrated. But Rocky, I really liked what you were saying, that, like, if you talk to people like your family, that can also help you remember that even if you don't end up agreeing, that you still have some connection on a base level. So I really appreciated that. But so, for example, I was talking to my brother, and he would probably be more like, Republican, and I would probably be more Democrat, like just for binaries, right? And so, and I said, I think Donald Trump is a racist. And he didn't like that because I think that that meant that if he likes Donald Trump, that he's a racist. And so that kind of got into that domain of, Jordan, what you're saying of like not forcing people to accept a label or like force a label on them, you know, and I saw that like that emotional wall come up of like, you know, now we're kind of at this like standstill and the conversation wasn't going anywhere. So a new tactic I tried with him that I felt like was maybe like a little bit, you know, broke through that wall was, well, then what does it mean to be you and anti-racist? What does it mean to be a Republican and anti-racist? Like, so if you are dedicated to being Republican and you don't want to say that you're racist, what does that look like? And then also just not, you know, putting that back on them. Like, come back to me. Let's check back in on this in a week and say, what'd you come up with? You know, because like all the books haven't been written yet. You know what I mean? Maybe that is possible, and I just don't. I think with the binaries it's difficult because he even asked me like, well, do you think all Republicans are racist? And I said, and I didn't want to answer that question because I don't think that kind of like binary yes or no is a helpful tool, because that eliminates the option that you can be Republican and not racist. Just show me what that looks like. That's what I was trying to ask him. So for anyone you ask like out there encountering some difficulty, maybe put that one in your back pocket of just like, okay, then you're dedicated to being you, whoever you are, you're the engineer. What does it mean to be an engineer and not racist? So just wanted to share that with you all.
Nice. Thank you. This is like, I think it's so great. I'm like in love with ideas. That's like my favorite thing to do is like share ideas and be open-minded. And to me, it's so important and so amazing to have slightly different versions of the same idea. And you gather enough of those and it's like, I don't know, it's like you're playing like a game and you like need the right gun, but then you just push square enough times and the gun switches to the right gun and you use that one, and then you just have this arsenal, this versatility to be able to be like, this is the one I like, but I understand where you're coming from and I understand how to get there from these various degrees, and I can dial it to these different ways to get you to understand. Because the way, Grant, you're talking about displaying that, like, what does that look like? That is not a natural way I would ask questions. But you're bringing that up, and I'm like, okay, I can see how that could work in certain situations. And now I have another tool in my toolkit. So thank you.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I'm definitely gonna steal that one, Grant. But one thing I feel like a lot of people don't do enough is just simply ask for help. Whether it's like with these ideas, like if you have an idea, you want to make a difference, but don't know how to go about it. Simply, and I feel like we're at an advantage right now because we're so connected, like either if it's online or if it's in public, to where it's reasonable to where you could put a question out to the public and you can get answers back much more easily than you may expect. Obviously, on one side, it does require you to be vulnerable in the sense of saying, "Hey, I don't know how to do this. Anyone know how to show me how?" Like I know for me, my life would be pretty bad without YouTube. I feel like 75% of everything I know how to do is. So, and so many people, whether it's just asking questions on Twitter or on Instagram, especially when you're coming from a genuine place, I've been surprised how helpful people have been. You say, hey, yeah, I know exactly how to do that, or I know someone who does, and just kind of building your networking or resources that way.
Yeah. And it can be very scary to ask questions, which is, it's strange. It's like the questions are like the easiest, most straightforward, arguably only actual way to get new information. But it's this thing that we resist because we're trying to pretend that we know everything or that we're strong or something like that. And asking a question, I don't think makes you weak. Asking a question, I think the whole idea of a question is like, I want to know more. And once I know more, then I am more. It makes you stronger. And admitting that you don't know everything, asking for help. And then I think kind of being open. When I think you ask a question, we had a workshop on good questions the other day, because I strongly believe that you can ask questions that are not as good as other questions. are you interested in what the other person has to say? Are you asking a question because you want a certain answer? Are you asking a question to just make somebody feel uncomfortable? Like, why are you asking this question? Did you try to answer the question yourself before you asked the question? Did you think about it? Or are you just trying to offload all the mental work to somebody else because you don't want to deal with it? And I think if you're asking a good question, you're genuine, you care about it, you tried to answer it yourself, you're trying to be open, you're listening, and you're just taking whatever comes your way. You don't have to accept it, but you ask the question. So at least I'm asking, if I ask Grant a question, I'm like, Grant, do some mental work for me and then give me the product. If I ask him to do a job for me, I should at least let him give me the work of his job. And respect him enough to listen to his answer, because I asked him to do me a favor and he did me that favor. So that can be very difficult because sometimes some people start talking and then the assumption machine turns on in your head and you're like, I see where this is going, to a place I don't want to go. And then like it can get difficult but you asked for it. You said, hey, can you give me a ride? And they were like, sure. And then you didn't say where to go, so they're going where they're going. So go. Yes, vary with ask questions, be open, and even just post online. If you don't understand something, like I don't read the news all the time. I basically live under a rock, and somebody like Michelle will be like, oh my gosh, there's a riot. And I'll be like, why is there a riot? And be like, because all these people died. And be like, people are dying? And I'll be like, oh, maybe I should put this textbook down and go outside. But I ask, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on, because a lot of times I don't watch the news. And I think that is important for other people if you don't understand a certain aspect of the argument, ask people that seem very adamant. And if they don't want to tell you, then that's a very interesting situation. I think it says a lot about what are they adamant about? But seek to understand.
I saw a tie-in. I heard a tie-in a little ways back, talking about intentionality and work and resource sharing. We all have amazing skills, and one of the things that I've noticed with people, it's mainly organizational, is when someone has an idea and they pitch it to the group, like, hey, who knows someone that can speak to the Black experience, the Black trans experience in LA, and we all might have a friend. That's the intention behind that work. Like, what's the intention? Is it because we're checking a box? Is it because we really want to make progress in this work? Most of the time in my experience, it has been checking a box, and we're going to do all this work pretty much for free. So there's something to be said for charging, at the very least, finding out why you're being asked to do this, and asking for some kind of compensation for it, just because it makes it not only for you, not only does it make it worthwhile for your time and gives validation to your experience, but it also makes the product more valuable to the organization. So I just wanted to bring that in. We just had a conversation about this a little while ago, and it was a very something I had never considered before. So I just wanted to throw that in there too.
Yeah, I would say, like, Michelle's a fashion designer, and I did not think in any way, shape, or form she should go design 20 custom dresses for free for this. No. I think, if we're talking about social justice and community, and she's a small business owner and you want her to help, you should pay her, because she's a small business owner that's part of the community, period. And if she wants to donate, if she just comes out of the woodwork and she's like, look at all these dresses I have, then okay, that's cool. But yes, the value for value thing. And I think in times of stress, we tend to polarize and move away from the base situation. And one of the things we do is we tend to overvalue and undervalue. We tend to label and pick sides. And if you're not, it's like the you're not with me, you're against me kind of thing. And no, if Michelle wants to get paid for her work, that doesn't make her a racist, ever. And if you say that, then maybe we need to have a conversation. But that's not fair to Michelle at all. to pressure her. And I'm sorry I'm putting you on the spot. You're in the panel directly next to my panel on the Zoom, so I'm like looking at you. But it's good to self-evaluate and understand that you have value, you can make a difference, and you have power, and you need to be valued. And don't let a movement or something, especially like when you have that feeling, oh, I need to do more, that doesn't mean you need to give up a piece of yourself that you can't grow back. That's not like, that can happen, and I appreciate the type of people that make that sacrifice, but that's not a necessary sacrifice that everybody needs to make, and it's often not a wise sacrifice, in my experience. Cool.
I definitely feel that. I feel like I can be overly self-sacrificial. And it's funny you say that. I was talking to Sasha, it's a mutual friend of Jordan and I. And I was telling her, oh, like I have all these dresses that I was planning to sell off, but I think I would like to, I don't know, I think I would like to just, I was planning to sell them for like 500, 600, this is like months ago. Because usually I charge a lot more, but these are pre-made samples, so they've been used. And so I was gonna charge around like 500, 600, but then I thought, well, I want this to be accessible and I want to encourage people to donate. And so I thought, well, maybe I can offer some of these pieces and just say, well, if you donate $100 to a cause, send me the receipt and I will send you a piece. And I mean, I'm still kind of, there's a part of me that's still okay with that because these are pieces that I've made and it is my decision. But at the same time, Sasha came back and she told me that, I don't think your pieces you should give them away for that much. But it's a conflict, because I would like to contribute, but I do feel like it'll be hard to have people donate, $500 or $600 for me to then give them a dress. Like, and I don't even necessarily feel like I need income from that, but yeah. So using myself as an example, since you used me as an example, I'm going to tell you your example is correct.
Well, even to continue off that, something that if you don't know Michelle, you probably don't know this, but the social justice movement we're in the middle of, that whole movement is in the middle of a global pandemic. And so we got this thing inside of this thing. And before this whole social movement, the social justice thing became very popular or very trendy, we were all like stuck inside, and Michelle started making masks for people. And that is a derivative of her fashion and clothes making skills that she transferred into something to help with COVID. And she makes really nice masks. The mask that I wear every day is one of hers, and it's like super comfortable. It's very nice. And I paid for it full price because there's a product that she made with her skills, and it did also help with what was going on in the world at that time. It still helps right now, but it wasn't something that she had to devalue. She didn't have to make 4,000 masks for free because she's still doing that work. She's still providing value. And I think it's great if you're in a place where you can provide all this stuff for free and it doesn't hurt you and whatever, but like, consistently remember, I think, that you have value to offer and not to just give all your value away. And very, very much to what Elliot said, I'm like super on with what he said about when you give valuable stuff away for free, it lowers the value of that stuff because it becomes easy to obtain.
Yeah.
And so you're devaluing your work and your labor in certain cases, by lowering the value of it. So when we're having this conversation, this is a very important conversation. I'm getting a lot of value from what you guys are saying and the fact that you guys are here and listening and stuff. So thank you guys. And I don't want to cheapen this experience by not being thankful, by not being grateful. And I think that when we all bring our skills, we should do it in a way where we accept that it takes effort to have these skills, to have these thoughts, to have courage to even stand up and talk or even show up. And so yeah, it's been kind of like an hour and a half, and I had no idea how long this was gonna last. But if you guys want to keep talking, let's keep talking. I do feel sometimes, because I've been hosting kind of a lot of these Zoom things since COVID started, that if I don't say something, sometimes people want to leave, but they feel like peer pressured to stay. because other people are staying. But if you have to go for whatever reason, please, peace be with you. Thank you for coming. I definitely think that I'm going to try to do this again in the future. I like this a lot. And I think that having a forum to speak and listen and listen without the desire to respond. I'm listening to listen. Michelle's talking and I'm trying to understand I'm not just waiting for her to pause a little bit longer than she normally does so I can jump in. I'm listening, and it's nice that that's happening, and I'm grateful for that, and I'm gonna try and continue this. So this talk will keep going.
The one on Saturday is still on, right?
Oh yeah. Well, that one is not about social justice. I'm having a community discussion on friendship and the whole concept of friendship and how important it is and what are the criteria. Everybody has their different rules for what's a friend and what's not a friend. And I think when other people talk and give you their different opinions, you're like, oh, maybe that's a good point. I didn't think about it that way. I'm gonna go meditate on that. So yeah, I'm having kind of Zoom discussion on friendship on Saturday, 6 o'clock. It's on my website, jordantremaine.com, and I'm at Instagram at jordantremaine_ if you want information on that. But yes, that's definitely happening. But I think I'm gonna have what do you guys think of so far with this herd concept?
I think this is really cool. I'm sorry that I was late. Oh, sorry. I think this is really cool. I'm sorry that I was late. One of my previous calls went long. But yeah, it's nice to listen. I've been having a lot of crazy interactions and thoughts over the last week. And so it's nice to just be here and to listen and contribute if I have anything to contribute.
Yeah, and I think just being here and listening is a lot of contribution, because like there's different types of plants, and a lot of plants have seeds, but not all seeds sprout at the same moment. And some plants take years to have their seeds sprout, but you need to plant them and you need to water them for those years. And some sprout tomorrow. So I think just showing up and being willing to plant those seeds and like water those seeds, I think is very important, because you never know. Sometimes when I was born, I didn't know what kind of plant I was. I'm still thinking I'm a human right now, so I'm still unsure. But yeah, thank you for coming, Lisa. And if you come late, you come late. That's fine.
Thank you, Lisa.
Such is
and I know Michelle, so it's nice to see you. Oh. I'm a photographer.
Oh, nice. Cool. Anybody else? I know Elliot, he came through because like I don't know why, like I saw your picture and it says it's like a picture of a butterfly, and I'm doing like the profiling thing in my head that I need to stop doing. But I was like, I see, that's probably a calm person. And I feel you were very calm, but the stuff you were saying, I was like, this is some good stuff. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I'm like thankful for you showing up and saying stuff that I wasn't thinking.
I would definitely say I'm a calmer person, but this past 2 weeks have gotten me pretty anxious and uppity and ready to see some change. I've been vocalizing to people, not so much so that they can help me work through my burden, but more so to pull their conversation out of them about how helpless I've been feeling with everything. And it's not so much like, I'm putting this burden on you for you to feel bad for me, but it's more so like, hey, if I'm feeling this way, then that means a lot of people are probably too. So let's have a dialogue about it. Let's turn this, for me, this really heavy feeling of helplessness into action. I'm back in 2008 with Prop 8. I was out protesting, 2 or 3 times a week, a couple times a month, and I've got kids and a family now, so my ability to do that is very limited. So I've had to redefine how I'm being an activist. Being an activist has definitely worked into my job, an environmental activist, and environmental justice goes hand in hand with that. So I feel like I accomplished a lot through that, but at the same time, I don't really have a lot of takeaways and a lot of tangibles. So this whole past 2 weeks has just been me kind of swimming through my own emotions, trying to figure out a way forward. So I think sessions like these where people can come together with different strengths, different skills, open minds, and just clear discussion is really cathartic for a lot of people, and accomplishes just that. Gives us a focus to what we're feeling. So thank you, Jordan. This was awesome.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up, like, that is such an important concept. What you said at the beginning of what your statement was just now. If you're experiencing something, like, there are 8 billion people on the planet right now, and the stronger you feel something, it's almost as if that means, like, as the strength of your feeling goes up, the more people are probably feeling that right now. And not to feel alone, not to feel like you're fighting this by yourself. It's something that you can connect with people if you can find them. And I think when you have strong feelings, it's kind of a signal to you to say, look, this is important. I need to go organize. I need to go find a way to contribute. If that's you're in that kind of space to do that. But that, I think a lot of people can end up not finding their true potential because they feel isolated, because they feel alone, because they feel like nobody is in the same boat as them. But I think because you have those feelings, it almost, before you even prove that there's other people, those feelings tend to validate that other people are feeling that way. So thank you for saying that. That's a good thought. I'm gonna learn how to do that clappy thing on Zoom one of these days. But I've yet to, oh, there's a reactions button. Bam, got it. But yeah, was there anything that anybody else wanted to bring up?
I wanted to ask since Jordan, you're compiling a document, is there a way that is there a good way that we should get emails and distribute it, or
Okay, so yeah, I have been working on a secret project where I've seen a lot of there's like posts that say links where you can donate and stuff, and there's Google Docs that have, like, I don't even know how you can find this many links on the internet in an organized way, but there's like pages and pages and pages of, like, donate here, watch this movie, here's a podcast, do this, do that. And that is great. I am an engineer and a technical document writer. I've written 600-page technical manuals by hand, word by word. And I look at these pages and I'm overwhelmed. And I'm like, so the type of person that doesn't read military spec numbers 8 hours a day has got to be like, what is this? That's my assumption. And so I was talking to Michelle in terms of with this herd concept and trying to encourage people to not necessarily fall into this trap of thinking that I can only contribute in this way, trying to look at yourself and saying, well, what can I bring to the table? What do I really care about? And how do I promote the good that I think is really good in my way? So I'm working on this document that does have links in it. There's a resources section, but it also kind of goes through words and paragraphs. And there's going to be some, I was talking to Michelle, I have to have a talk with Michelle. She sent me this email. It's got all this stuff in it. But trying to create a document that's not just links. It helps you navigate through the links, and it helps you understand why you're clicking on links, or why you would donate, or why you would watch this movie. Not just, hey, watch these 5 movies. And giving you more of, like, as you don't need to click on any of the links in the document to get something out of it. As you go through the document, it kind of brings you into this space where I want to encourage people to listen to both sides. I want to encourage people to not seek violence and not break the law. I understand that people are frustrated. In my opinion, it doesn't matter what someone is doing to you. You should not be evil. And that's the most difficult thing when you're dealing with people you perceive to be evil. That is literally the most difficult. But I still believe if you can, at all costs, put away your emotion and think logically. And I want to create, I'm working on creating a document that tries to outline methods of educating yourself and being proactive and having activism that are progressive and safe for everybody to do, that still puts pressure on making positive change, but doesn't but moves away from this idea of extremism. And that's me, that's my kind of thoughts. And I need to talk to Michelle about that because I think she's gonna help me on it. But I think I was just gonna post that like on Instagram and stuff, like links to it when it was like usable. But it still needs a little bit of work. So I hope that answered your question, Michelle, because I just started ranting.
I think, if anyone does want to leave their email or send it to Jordan just in case, because sometimes it's, sometimes we miss posts, and I mean, I miss posts all the time.
Yeah, if you can DM me on Instagram, I think that's the best way for me to not accidentally ignore you. So if you have suggestions for stuff, I'm not even sure if I suggested this or if Michelle did, but there's times where people say stuff and I go like, yeah, that's a good idea. And then I'll go build a whole event off of it, or I'll go start a whole thing off of it. And like the skill sharing thing, I brought that up because I just wanted to kind of just share ideas and get people thinking, not necessarily go out and do this. Because sometimes you think a thought, but then other people start talking and it changes that thought. You grow in your thought because you have the other inputs. And yeah, I would love to share more with you guys. If you guys want to take the talk offline, I call people and talk to them. I text people and talk to them. If they ask questions, I answer them. You can ask some of the people here. We've had some interesting discussions, and I'm always open to talk. If you want help with how to talk to somebody or questions you can ask, I can brainstorm with you and stuff. But that's kind of what I'm trying to contribute going forward on a regular basis, not just with as soon as this is over, I'm going to stop. This is something that I'm doing consistently to the future.
I would throw out there, I thought the conversation around how to value your labor and your work was a really good question to bring up, and I think everyone's probably got their own answer to that. But for me, and one thing I would love just to throw out there to any of you, by trade, I work in personal financial planning, and I have reserved time just for free financial advice. So I have I'm going to just put a link in the chat. So if any of you guys, because obviously, if you're concerned about your money situation, that can take a lot out of you and detract from your ability to participate in other ways. So just to bring my own skills to the table, I just want to put that out to you guys. Take it or leave it, but be happy to just talk to you offline, casually. Hopefully, give you some good advice.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. That's awesome. That is something else I would like to say, though. I think there is a point where we all can decide, right? Like the value, like if something is of really high value, maybe it's too much of a strain on our health to offer that for free. But if we do have that time allocated, and yeah, it doesn't cause any burden, then why not go for it? And I mean, I would like to help too. If there, I have experience with Photoshop and Illustrator, so if anyone needs help putting together like some words or graphics or even just advice, I also, as Jordan mentioned, I sent him a really long email with a lot of thoughts. I am also very, very willing to offer opinions. If you are trying to work through something or just want, want to see how someone else might receive it, maybe receives it from another perspective or receives it visually.
Well, Michelle, I think I'm definitely going to harass you about the Photoshop thing. Grant, I'm probably going to call you anyways because that sounds like an interesting talk. But like the community is a bunch of people that have different skills, different experiences, and different opportunities. And there is the look at life, the zero-sum game where if you get some, then I get less. But I think there's also the where if I give something to you, that gives me something. And now we both have more. And depending on how you look at it, I think there can be different outcomes in your life. But I like the community where we take care of each other, we build on each other, and if we're suffering, we help each other. So please practice self-care. Please check up on people. We're still in a quarantine. Technically, even though it doesn't seem like that. And like, take care of the people around you. Make sure the people around you are strong. Create that support system. Be that support system. And then I think once you're good, once you're stable, and maybe that's already happening, see what else you can do for the larger community. But I think the self-education, self-care, and then trying to take care of the people that you love is already a lot in terms of resistance and social justice and things like that. So thank you, Rocky. I see that you put some stuff on there. And I'm trying to think, is there a good way to post like Skillshare information? Because I feel like once we get off this Zoom, nobody has access to any of this stuff.
Well, if you want, you can like, I mean, I guess it depends on how public you want it to be. If you want to do like a story to your, what's it called, like your close friends or whatever, or just do a story and then put in your highlights, that might be an easy way for you to just keep like saving stuff over the long term. If you keep doing stories and you want to like keep track of it forever, just put it in a highlights and then call that resources or something, and then people will know, oh, that's where you go to get the plug on people who know how to do stuff.
Okay, that's a good idea. I'm not going to do that this time because I didn't pre-warn people, but if you want a link or something to talk to somebody that you forgot, you lost the contact after this meeting, contact me and I can try to get you in contact with them. But in the future, that's a really good point, Rocky, and I'll bring that up at the beginning of the conversation so it's not like a surprise to people later. But cool. I think we could talk all night. This is a good kind of forum, but I also think that it's important to kind of step away from conversation and to think and to experience. I call it like right now I'm like cutting my potatoes and my carrots and my onions and stuff, and I put them in the pot, and then I need to let them go simmer for a while. I can't just I need to cook my soup for a minute before it tastes good. So yeah, I think might do this next week.
Yeah, I think we should.
And then yeah, I'll put up some posts about it next week, and hopefully you guys can join. Hope you guys had a good experience, and I'd really love to hear like if any of the stuff we talked about today carries over into what you do this week. That'd be cool to talk about it. Like if we did this on a regular basis, how what we're doing is having the impact. So yeah, thank you guys for coming. I appreciate you.
Yay. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you, Jordan. Appreciate it. Nice to see you all, meet you all. Hope you have a good night.
Thank you.
Obrigado, boa noite.
You guys.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, fun times.
For the messenger, does everything go away when we close? Like, do you still have it?
Did you want something out of it?
I just don't want to lose the links and the emails. So let me see.
I know everybody that posted links.
Okay.
So what I said holds true, as you can DM me and then I can push you to the person.
Gotcha. Okay.
Oh, there's a button. Thank you, Artemis. You can save chat.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I see that now. Amazing. Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
Pro tips.
I know, I still don't know how to do the wave thing, but anyways. Okay, I guess I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, I'm gonna eat some dinner, and then tomorrow I'm free if you wanted to talk a little bit about the manuscript thing.
Yeah, tomorrow works for me. Well, actually, what time tomorrow? Because I know I'm supposed to talk to Sasha.
Whenever.
I
got off of work at like 5. Huh? Did you say do I sleep? Is that what you asked me?
How late do you stay up?
There's certain times where I forget to sleep, and then there's certain times where I sleep all day.
Okay. Okay, so maybe
if you call me, look, if you wake me up, I'll be awake and then I'll talk to you, and you shouldn't feel bad.
Okay, I'll definitely feel bad. Okay, so all right, I'll just message you tomorrow, and if not tomorrow, then Saturday. Saturday's totally open.